I call the member for Mackellar.
We are just simply too polite in the Federation chamber. Dr. Freelander and I were falling over ourselves to give each other the call. Mr Deputy Speaker, can I firstly start by congratulating the member for Parramatta on this very excellent motion. My wife recently had her job relocated to Parramatta. It means that her drive, because that is the only way to get to Parramatta from Collaroy or the Northern Beaches, is now 2 hours, or on some days is 2 hours both ways. What the member for Parramatta said about the disruption to family lives, the impact it has on children and on communities, I can only echo with a factor of 10. The impact it has had on our daughter, on our family, and indeed on my wife's psychology and mental health as well, being stuck in traffic like that. I often am bemused, and not in a good way, when people from other parts of Australia and other cities of Australia talk about traffic congestion, and then as a Member of Parliament you are variously shunted around the country to different committee hearings, and you note that no one quite knows what traffic congestion is until they come to Sydney. It is fair to say, having heaped all that praise upon the member for Parramatta, I should note that the State Government of New South Wales has done an enormous amount for the people of Western Sydney, and indeed for the entire Sydney Basin. They have spent $23.5 billion on WestConnex, the M4 and the M5. They are spending nearly $4 billion on 2 light rail lines in Parramatta. The North West Metro, which has recently opened, cost $8 billion. The Parramatta West Metro, to which this motion speaks, will cost somewhere in the vicinity of $22 billion. You have the Sydney Metro, which is another $23.5 billion. You have the Aerotropolis, of course, I don't need to say very much more about that. And you have the first high-rise public school in Australia at Parramatta, which is $300 million. The reason for this, and of course I left out NorthConnex, which will relieve a lot of traffic pressure on West Pennant Hills Road and people trying to get into Parramatta itself, the Parramatta CBD itself. So the reason, though, for all of this was, let us not forget, the $50 billion in infrastructure backlog that was left at the end of the Carr-Keneally government, where you had a Premier who said Sydney is full, people need to go away, and then at that very moment you had a federal government in the form of the Rudd government increasing immigration to 400,000 people, many of whom settled in Western Sydney. I would also reflect on a couple of other things too, Mr Deputy Speaker. The first is the move that the state government has made to move a lot of government services and departments to Parramatta. While I welcome this in theory and in principle, it does have two deleterious effects. The first is that there are many core services, for example legal services, which have an ecosystem based in the Sydney CBD. Relocating those services, or part of those services, to Parramatta has a very negative impact on productivity. It also has the impact of diminishing people's access to those services from other parts of Sydney. So, as I said, from the Northern Beaches, on most days, a drive to Parramatta can take up to 2 hours. It was not the case to the CBD, and is not the case for many other people in Sydney. I think the state government needs to be very cautious about what services it relocates to Parramatta and what sort of access impacts that has on the rest of Sydney and the rest of New South Wales. And of course on the ecosystem or the supply chain, in particular in legal services, where you will have lawyers and barristers based in the city, and the courts naturally, especially in particular specialities like industrial relations, are also based mostly in the CBD. The Fair Work Commission is based in William Street of Woolloomooloo. The other thing is a plug. The other plug. Well, the member for Chifley knows very well, because he and I have many friends in common, They like to deny it, depending on who they're having dinner with, that many of them do live in the western suburbs of Sydney. But they go, no, now he denies it too. I hear the cock crowing a third time, Mr Deputy Speaker. But the other thing is...
Order. The honourable member's time has expired.